Now let's go meet some nice policemen. They're good guys. Come on, let's go.
I'm the bad guy?
Yeah.
How'd that happen? I did everything they told me to.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I wanted to open with that scene from the end of a classic movie called Falling Down with obviously Michael Douglas and Robert Duvall. And Michael Douglas has just finished going on a kind of a rampage throughout Los Angeles. You know, he engages in ever escalating acts of violence. And, you know, some of them are justified, some of them aren't. Some of them are super over the top in terms of his response. And at the end here, Robert Duvall, the police officer that's been chasing him throughout the movie, helps Michael Douglas to a really heartbreaking realization. And you saw it there when he realizes, I'm the bad guy? How did that happen? And the reason why I wanted to show that is because I think all of us know on some level that we can tunnel vision in on goals or just what we're doing or what we are at least hoping to do, and lose sight of maybe how we're going about it or just our actions generally. That's what happened. Michael Douglas just went on this crazy tear throughout the city, and he still didn't realize until the very end, wait, I'm the bad guy here. And I think that speaks to the human condition, that none of us want to see ourselves as the bad guy. None of us want to see ourselves as doing something wrong, or especially something that would be, you know, over the top wrong. You know, I am the bad guy. I'm operating as the bad guy in this story. You know, I highly doubt that even, you know, the worst soldiers from the worst regimes throughout history regarded themselves as evil or as the bad guys. You know, instead they convinced themselves of the morality and the just nature of their causes. And it isn't until they later, you know, take a step back and reflect on maybe what they did or how they went about it, that they realize that they did wrong. And so that's what we're going to talk about in this video is how do people who, you know, could be well-intentioned really get caught up in something, or, you know, go down a road where they don't realize that they are starting to operate as, you know, kind of the bad guy in some ways. And what I really want to build on here is the case that I made in my video, The Road to Hell is Paved with Eggshells, from a few weeks ago, where I introduced the idea that one of the reasons that things feel so tense right now, why people feel like they're constantly having to walk on eggshells, why, you know, as we just found out from this recent, there was a huge survey that was done. I don't think it was Ipsos. I'll put a link to it. I'll put it in the description, that the majority of Americans don't feel comfortable sharing their political beliefs or just their, you know, ideas about politics or ideology generally, because they're afraid that they'll get harsh criticism and get all this backlash. You know, there's only one group that feels comfortable doing that, and that's those who identify as progressive. They feel totally comfortable sharing their views, but the rest of the country is self-censoring. And whenever you have an atmosphere where you're self-censoring, where you there's a constant kind of implicit threat of what happens if you express doubt, not even, you know, opposition and no, your idea is wrong, here's the right idea, but just generic doubt, that if you just don't go along to get along, that there will be threat, there will be consequences. And again, there's that walking on eggshell and just that constant sense of discomfort and tension, that's an environment of abuse. And that was the argument I made in that other video, where I said, I think that we have one portion of the population that's functioning as an emotionally abusive person. It could be emotionally abusive partner or just relationship generally, towards the rest of the population. That's one reason why it feels the way it feels right now for so many of us, that again, that tension and those eggshells, because that's an environment of abuse. And in that other video, I unpacked Barry Weiss's resignation letter from the New York Times and what she described the environment of the New York Times. And I used some resources for victims of emotional abuse and the testimony of, I think, at least 2 women who had been survivors of emotionally abusive relationships, and showed the parallels between the two. And one of the arguments that I made there that I want to kind of unpack for you here is that a large portion of the people who are propagating this environment of abuse, who are engaging in it, who are pushing it forward, actually don't realize that they're doing it. And this is a video, I took so long trying to figure out how I wanted to go about making this, because it's a difficult topic generally. And especially, what I mentioned in my first one is there's lots of different people that this affects them in different ways. There are people who just feel bullied into silence. There's people who are just trying to figure it out. There's people that are in opposition but don't want to lose their jobs. And there's people that are just super well-intentioned, and they're absorbing a lot of this stuff because they hear the buzzwords of, fighting oppression and fighting for justice and equity, not equality, but equity, and so on and so forth. And so because they're well-intentioned folks, they buy into it because, they want to be a good ally or whatever. And really what they're absorbing from this ideology, the mannerisms, the values, the culture of this ideology, and then whenever they absorb it and then they interact with the rest of us, they unintentionally propagate an atmosphere of abuse. And so it's a difficult topic to cover. And so I wanted to do it as carefully as possible, which is, of course, why I chose the movie Mean Girls as the main one we're going to look at, right? Because of course, I would do that. But I want to really hammer home that if you get nothing else out of this today, is that, how would you know if you had become the bad guy? And what does it look like for people that are well-intentioned to convince themselves that they're doing something right, or to buy into certain beliefs and ideologies of certain cultures, and to lose themselves in it? And so we're going to look at the transformation of Katie's character, played by Lindsay Lohan, obviously before she lost her mind, in the movie Mean Girls, and look at her transformation throughout the movie. We're just going to look at, I think, I got a couple of clips here that we're going to observe, and then we're going to use that along with some resources. Some of the research I did for this was on the topic of cultural, organizational cultures and corporations and the cultures that they try to develop. And because there's all these resources for cultural development and organizational development within these different groups, because a lot of the principles of how organizational cultures develop remain true, whether you're talking about the largest company or nonprofit or political system, all the way down to the smallest subcultures, including, high school cliques. And so, the point that I'm trying to get at here, and then we'll get into some of these clips, is that, different groups have different values and mannerisms and rhetoric and lingo and things that they say and how they conduct themselves. And then whenever you start to immerse yourself in these different cultures, subcultures, you start to adopt those things. And so this is just about, people that are united by interests or values or things like that. So one of the examples that I've given to people before is if I say, okay, close your eyes and imagine you're watching a movie, and the next scene is going to take place at a biker bar, and it's late at night, and you're told to visualize what the biker bar is going to be like. Okay, so close your eyes and think about it. Think about the music. What are the people wearing? How are they talking? What's parked out front? So on and so forth. And once you have a really good picture of that, okay, now actually, no, you weren't supposed to picture a biker bar. You're supposed to picture a cowboy bar, in West Texas or something. Does the picture change at all? Like, are the people wearing the same things? Are they speaking the same way, listening to the same music? Are they the same vehicles parked out front? Or is it entirely different? Why? If so, why? Well, of course, we know that, the music and probably the slang and everything, and the way people dress at a cowboy bar is going to be very different than a biker bar. The same way that if you hang out in the barracks at maybe a military basic training at boot camp somewhere with a platoon of soldiers, and then you go and hang out at Comic-Con with around like the table for the Marvel Studios or something, it's going to be very, very different. The way they're going to talk is going to be different. The lingo, the slang, everything's going to be very different in terms of how they operate. And if you hang around one group long enough, you're going to adopt those mannerisms and those values and the lingo and everything in the same way that you would if you hung around the other one. And so but the point is that we all know these things to be true. We know that different cultures and subcultures have their own kind of flavor to them. And the rules of how those come to be, what defines them, how they get promulgated, how they get reinforced, again, is true, whether it's, a high school clique or, a large corporation like Google or something like that. But we'll get into some of those details here in a minute. So the first clip we're going to look at is, and now first, if you haven't seen Mean Girls, then I don't know what to tell you, but to kind of just give you a brief summary of the movie. First off, this is a movie that totally cannot be made today. People always talk about like Blazing Saddles and Airplane and stuff like that. Like, this is a movie that could not be made today. It's totally been canceled. Whenever I was researching this, I use that term very loosely, but I found a bunch of articles about this where people were talking about how this movie is like so antiquated and how it's so problematic. That's the term they use for a lot of reasons. And I'm sure you'll see some of them in this, at least this first opening clip. But it's about this girl she grew up in Africa. Her parents were researchers, and her mom gets a job at a university. And so she's going to be in public school for the first time. She'd been homeschooled up to that point. And so she's just kind of thrown into the environment of, the drama and the social, norms and all these other things, the dynamics of just a regular high school. And she gets befriended by two kind of social outcasts, so to speak. And they give her this map of the cafeteria to help her kind of get her bearings of what it's like there at North Shore High School. So that's the first clip we're going to watch here. And we're going to get a sense for who Katie is as a person at the beginning of this film before she starts to immerse herself in this other culture with the plastics.
Crucial, because you got everybody there. You got your freshmen, ROTC guys, preps, JV jocks, Asian nerds, cool Asians, varsity jocks, unfriendly black hotties, girls who eat their feelings, girls who don't eat anything, desperate wannabes, burnouts, sexually active band geeks, the greatest people you will ever meet, and the worst. Beware of the plastic.
Hey, we're doing a lunchtime survey of new students. Can you answer a few questions?
Okay.
Is your muffin buttered?
What?
Would you like us to assign someone to butter your muffin?
My what? Is he bothering you? Jason, why are you such a skis?
I'm just being friendly.
You were supposed to call me last night.
Jason, you do not come to a party at my house with Gretchen and then scam on some poor innocent girl right in front of us 3 days later. She's not interested. Do you want to have sex with him?
No, thank you.
Good. So it's settled. So you can go shave your back now. Bye, Jason.
Bitch.
Wait. Sit down. Seriously, sit down. Why don't I know you?
I'm new. I just moved here from Africa.
What?
I used to be homeschooled.
Wait, what?
My mom taught me at home.
No, I know what homeschool is. I'm not retarded. So you've actually never been to a real school before? Shut up. Shut up.
I didn't say anything.
Homeschooled. That's really interesting.
Thanks.
You're like really pretty.
Thank you.
So you agree?
What?
You think you're really pretty?
Oh, I don't know.
Oh my God, I love your bracelet. Where did you get it?
Oh, my mom made it for me.
It's adorable.
Oh, it's so fetch.
What is fetch?
Oh, it's like slang from England.
So if you're from Africa, why are you white?
Oh my God, Karen, you can't just ask people why they're white.
Could you give us some privacy for like 1 second?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, you should just know that we don't do this a lot, so this is like a really huge deal.
We want to invite you to have lunch with us every day for the rest of the week.
Oh, it's okay. Coolness. So we'll see you tomorrow.
On Wednesdays, we wear pink.
Okay, so what we have there is you can see the difference between Lindsay Lohan's character and the plastics. So they, her friends give her this map of the different groups, which again, I thought about showing some different clips from different movies describing high school cliques, where you have that in like the movie Clueless and The Breakfast Club and Not Another Teen Movie, these different kind of tropes. And the point is, I don't need to substantiate the claim that different groups have different values and act differently. I mean, you can see it there, that there's the sexually active band kids are very different than, the burnouts or the tryhards or whatever, and different than the plastics. And so But you can see the differences there where Lindsay Lohan's character, she's her own person. She's, you can contrast her with Rachel McAdams' character where, you know, Lindsay Lohan's just kind of like, she doesn't have any buy-in. She's clearly an outsider from their group, the Plastics. And so in the next scene, Lindsay Lohan's going to learn and kind of articulate the rules of this organization, of this culture that is the Plastics. And she draws a distinction between their rules and the rules of, you know, the outside world. And the point is that different cultures and organizational cultures have various rules. They have values, they have rewards and penalties. We'll get into that here in a second. But she's starting to learn. So she's now being introduced to this subculture. She's been invited to come and join them. And so now she's going to learn the rules of this new group that she's being integrated into. She's going to learn the girl rules.
Having lunch with the Plastics was like leaving the actual world and entering girl world.
So leaving the culture I'm used to, and I'm now part of a different culture with different rules and different values.
Girl world had a lot of rules.
You can't wear a tank top 2 days in a row, and you can only wear your hair in a ponytail once a week. So I guess you pick today. Oh, and we only wear jeans or track pants on Fridays. Now, if you break any of these rules, you can't sit with us.
Of course, there's an advertisement.
Este ha sido el año de lo inimaginable. Por eso en Wells Fargo estamos usando
I'm going to mute this. It's got another 8 seconds. But notice that Gretchen is describing to her, here are the rules. And by the way, if you break them, there's going to be a penalty. And the penalty is you don't get to sit with us anymore.
Well, I mean, not just you, like any of us. Okay, like if I was wearing jeans today, I would be sitting over there with the art freaks. Oh, and we always vote before we ask someone to eat lunch with us because you have to be considerate of the rest of the group. Well, I mean, you wouldn't buy a skirt without asking your friends first if it looks good on you.
I wouldn't.
Right. Oh, and it's the same with guys. Like, you may think you like someone, but you could be wrong.
120 calories and 48 calories from fat. What percent is that?
Anyway, and so I'm going to pause it there. We don't need to watch the rest of that clip. But the point is that she learns that there's different rules. And after that, Regina George, that's Rachel McAdams' character, gets up to go get some cheese fries. And Lindsay Lohan talks about how she has a crush on this boy. And Gretchen tells her, no, we don't date each other's exes, like, because Regina dated that guy. And you don't do that. Those are just the rules of feminism, I think she says. So the point is she's saying, part of our culture, part of our group, we have different rewards and we have different penalties. And the penalty, these are the rules. And if you follow the rules, you get to be part of it. And we'll get into what the perks of being one of the Plastics is here in a second. But there's also penalties if you don't. You're on the outside. You don't get to sit with us. You don't get to be part of our group. And this actually is totally, again, these rules and the way that organizations and cultures within them work are as true for a fictional clique of girls in high school as they are for large scale companies and organizations. This is a slide from a TED talk by a woman named Ann Rhodes. This is all about organizational cultures and how you can create organizational cultures based on values and performance. And what she outlines here is actually really similar to what you'll find in a lot of the research for organizational cultures. Because, I mean, this is an entire field of study, because if you're in a company and you're leading a company, you want to try and intentionally create certain kinds of cultures for your organization or for your company or for whatever it is that are going to drive the performance of your company. And so what Rhodes lays out here, she says, first you have the leaders, and the leaders disseminate values into the organization. And as the leaders drive the values, those values drive the behaviors of people that are within the organization. And the behaviors of every individual, as is informed by the values, is what creates the general culture of the organization. And the culture of the organization is what drives or inhibits the performance of that organization. And so the point is that it all kind of starts with the value system of the organization as kind of disseminated by the leaders or those who are perceived to be the leaders. And that creates all these behaviors. And baked into those behaviors and the culture generally is, again, rewards and penalties. From the same TED Talk, Ann Rhodes has a quote that I wanted to read to you. She says, accountability and rewards are a huge part of organizations. People are rewarded for doing a good job in a way that is meaningful as defined by the values of the organization. And here's an excerpt from a textbook on organizational cultures. It says, quote, organizational cultures are created by a variety of factors, including founders' values and preferences, industry demands, and early values, goals, and assumptions. Culture is maintained through attraction, selection, attrition. So they attract people. Those people either select out or they self-select for who they want to be if they want to be part of the organization. And then attrition is those who leave are not compatible with the goals and the values of that organization. And so that's how it's maintained, is by keeping people whose values and whose, I guess just life generally, personality is compatible with those of the organization. Anyway, and it's maintained through like I said, attraction, selection, attrition, new employee onboarding, leadership, and organizational reward systems. Signs of a company's culture include organization's mission statement, stories, physical layout, rules, and policies and rituals. And so the point is that I want to emphasize kind of the rewards and penalties here for a second, again, as informed by the values, because those are the things that kind of help people get a feel, get a general sense for how they're supposed to operate. Like you learn really quickly, as Lindsay Lohan learns, that there are certain behaviors that if you want to be part of this, there are certain behaviors that are going to be rewarded and there are certain behaviors that are going to be penalized. I've mentioned this book before as a book I read maybe like a year or two ago called Contagious by Jonah Berger. And he lists 5 things that make an idea or a product or something contagious, which means it is something that people are compelled to share with others. It's what makes things go viral. It's what makes things gain popularity because people want to share. And the very first principle he lays out in the book is that we only share things that we think are going to increase our social currency with other people. And he uses the word cool. Like, people want to be perceived as cool, so we only tell stories that make us look cool. We only share information and share things that are going to make us look cool. Now, I would argue that today, cool is not a thing that on anyone's radar. No one's thinking about cool. Now it's about being woke, being, someone who is a good ally, someone who's fighting oppression, being part of this morally, quote, enlightened group who is, fighting for equity and, wants to tear down the patriarchal, colonial system of white oppression, capitalism, the words, the thing, as Joe Biden would say. Anyway, and so like my point is that that's part of the reward system, is that you learn that if I go along with these values, as Jonah Berger talks about, what makes something contagious is it increases your social capital. Well, in organizations, anything that is, I guess, perpetuates the values or reinforces the values of the organization is going to gain you social capital. Anything that makes it seem like you might be in tension with the values of the organization or the culture is going to be penalized. And so that's what Lindsay Lohan's character just learns about, is that there are these rules, there's penalties, but there's also some rewards. So we'll look at that clip now, where she starts to kind of integrate these values. She's hanging out more and more with the plastics, and as a result, she's starting to subconsciously integrate their values, their lingo, their mannerisms, everything into her behavior. Again, this is a largely subconscious process.
The weird thing about hanging out with Regina was that I could hate her, and at the same time, I still wanted her to like me.
Okay. You have really good eyebrows.
Thanks.
Move.
Same with Gretchen. The meaner Regina was to her, the more Gretchen tried to win Regina back. She knew it was better to be in the plastics, hating life, than to not be in it all. Because being with the plastics was like being famous. People looked at you all the time, and everybody just knew stuff about you.
That new girl moved here from Africa. I saw Katie Heron wearing army pants and flip-flops, so I bought army pants and flip-flops.
That Katie girl is hot. She might even be hotter than Regina George.
I hear Regina George is dating Aaron Samuels again. The two were seen canoodling at Chris Iso's Halloween party, and they've been inseparable ever since.
Don't stop, get it till your clothes get
I was a woman possessed. I spent about 80% of my time talking about Regina, and the other 20% of the time I was praying for someone else to bring her up so I could talk about her more.
She's not even that good looking if you really look at her.
I don't know. Now that she's getting fatter, she's got pretty big jugs.
I could hear people getting bored with me, but I couldn't stop. It just kept coming up like word vomit.
I have this theory that if you cut all her hair off, she'd look like a British man.
Yeah, I I know you told me that one before. Oh. Hey, I'm having an art show, so you should take a night off from your double life. I want you to see it.
Coolness.
Coolness.
What does that smell?
Oh, Regina gave me some perfume.
You smell like a baby prostitute.
Thanks.
Meanwhile,
So anyway, so what do we see here? We see that, so Katie's talking about, so she learned here are the rules, there's the dynamics, there's the values, they value, there's other scenes obviously where they learn about, or where you see that Katie understands that they value their looks a lot, their appearance is huge, stirring up drama, maintaining this kind of power and legitimacy, because why? Well, what did she say at the beginning? It's still better to be in the plastics than outside of the plastics because there's benefits to being in this group. And so I understand the rules. I know that if I break the rules, I don't get to sit with them. I don't get to be part of this group. But so I want to be a part of it. And there's also benefits to that. I'm kind of perceived like a famous person here. And so the point is, again, there are different rewards and penalties in every organization, in every culture. Whenever people kind of unite and create a culture or subculture, again, whether it's the smallest group all the way up to the largest organization, the rules stay the same in terms of how they function and how they're maintained and how they're promulgated. And so you see here that Katie is saying, like, I was a woman obsessed. A lot of this is subconscious. She's like, it's just spilling out of me. And, even though I don't like Regina, I still want her to like me. And so there's a subconscious transformation taking place. And even though she kind of acknowledges like this is happening, it's still a subconscious thing, because you see she's checking out her appearance and she's speaking in a really catty kind of way, and in a way that's very different than her character at the beginning of the movie. Why? Because she's beginning to adopt the mannerisms and, again, the lingo. Think about the very first scene that we watched whenever Regina George tells her, like, oh, yeah, you're going to hang out with us all week. Coolness. And then you hear Katie saying coolness. So she's mimicking the dress, the behavior, the mannerisms, everything of the plastics. And so then this last little bit here we're going to watch is kind of Katie's transformation fully into this new identity.
I had learned how to control everyone around me.
Hey, I'm having a small get-together at my house tomorrow night.
Is Regina going?
No, do you think I'm an idiot? No, it's just gonna be a few cool people, and you better be one of them, biatch.
I don't go.
Shut up. I love that shirt on you.
She sounds just like Regina, when she's talking to this guy that she likes, Aaron Samuels, you better be there, biatch. That's how the plastics talk. And she's saying, I learned how to manipulate. So I learned the rules of the game. I integrated the values, because that's what the plastics do. They manipulate everyone around them. And, that wasn't something that her character was trying to do at the beginning of the movie, but she gets this new value structure and learns to manipulate people to get her way. And then we kind of see her final transformation here at the end, whenever her friends who had initially, kind of been the ones telling her, you should hang out with them so we can kind of get the into the plastics and make fun of them. And she blows her friends off for this party she throws, doesn't tell them. And then, her friends kind of confront her with the harsh reality.
You dirty little liar.
I'm sorry, I can explain.
Explain how you forgot to invite us to your party?
Janice, I cannot stop this car. I have a curfew.
You know I couldn't invite you. I had to pretend to be plastic.
Buddy, you're not pretending anymore. You're plastic. Cold, shiny, hard plastic.
Curfew, 1 a.m. It is now 1:10.
Did you have an awesome time? Did you drink awesome shooters and listen to awesome music and then just sit around and soak up each other's awesomeness?
You know what? You're the one who made me like this, so you could use me for your 8th grade revenge.
God, see, at least me and Regina George know we're mean. You try to act like you're so innocent, like,
oh, I used to live in Africa with all the little birdies and the little monkeys. You know what? It's not my fault you're, like, in love with me or something.
What?
Oh, no, she did not.
See, that is the thing with you plastics. You think that everybody is in love with you when actually everybody hates you. Like Aaron Samuels, for example, he broke up with Regina, and guess what? He still doesn't want you. So why are you still messing with Regina, Katie? I'll tell you why, because you are a mean girl. You're a...
She has other words for her, as you can see. But the point is that Katie is now fully transformed into this new identity, as being a plastic. That's what her friend Janice tells her there. You're not pretending anymore. You are now plastic. You are now this. And Katie starts to kind of justify, no, you convinced me to do this. This was your idea to do this. And there's another point earlier in the movie where Katie really gets on board because this guy that she liked, Aaron, Regina George, because she's a horrible person, starts dating Aaron instead. And so Katie has all these justifications for why she's doing what she's doing. She's helping her friend Janice. She's getting back at Regina. These are horrible people in the first place. But she also acknowledges there's some benefits because it's better to be in the group than to not be in the group. And so all that to say that people can get caught up in these, whenever you start to immerse yourself in various cultures, the more you're in it, which is what happens with Katie in the movie, she's spending every day with these girls and every night with them, that she starts to subconsciously integrate their values, the vernacular, everything into who she is. To the, at one point her mom says, "Who are you?" I spent hours when I was first going to make this video trying to find just any scene from a movie where a parent was like, ever since you started hanging out with X, I feel like I don't know you anymore. I feel like there's like 100,000 scenes in movies and I could not find one. I got so frustrated. I'm like, screw it. I'm just going to use Mean Girls. And I was originally going to do a bunch of clips, but of different things. But anyway, the point is that she starts to become something else without necessarily realizing it. And this is something that, again, that all of us know on a base level, that whenever you start to hang out with certain groups or start to, think about if anyone has had a friend who joined, like maybe wasn't a religious person and then they join a church or they, become a believer or whatever, then they start to change and, you see differences in their life because these new ideas that they've incorporated, these new values, and they start to, talk and start to, mirror that whatever it is they become a part of. And so back to my original claim that there's a lot of people who are functioning in terms of as abusers, in terms of articulating the values and living out the values and the lingo and the rhetoric of this, what I call far left orthodoxy, this, kind of woke scold, whatever, very highly, quote, inclusive, whatever, when really they're bullying into silence. Again, that's why the majority of people don't feel like they can even share their views, because who wants to be called a racist or a misogynist or a bigot or anything like that? And another part of this that I think makes this really, this ideology incredibly effective is I think that the people who are, again, I'm only talking about the well-intentioned folks who don't realize what they are, they're absorbing all these mannerisms, or absorbing all these values and the reward penalty structures of this, kind of culture. And then whenever they're a part of it, and then whenever they're interacting with the rest of us, then they're promulgating that and they don't realize what they're doing. There was this comic that came to my mind. I used to love I still love The Far Side, this old Gary Larson comic. And the first caption, for people who are listening to this, says, "What we say to dogs." And it's a guy talking to his dog. Says, "Okay, Ginger, I've had it. You stay out of the garbage. Understand, Ginger? Stay out of the garbage or else." And it says, "What they hear, blah, blah, Ginger, blah, 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 Ginger, blah, 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 blah." And the point is, the joke is that, we can say all we want to dogs, but they only hear the part that's important to them, which is their name. And I think that one of the aspects, because this thing, when I'm talking about this far left orthodoxy, it brands itself as being the moral, coming from a moral place. We're fighting oppression. We're anti-fascist, right? We're anti-racism. I saw a tweet from someone who said, "I'm going to start an organization called Anti-Bad Things and just do whatever I want. And when people complain, I'll just refer them back to my name." I thought that was pretty funny. But the point is that this thing brands itself as being moral and being, fighting oppression, all this other stuff. And so I think well-intentioned people, they just want to be a quote, good ally or whatever. And they want to, no one wants to, again, going back to Michael Douglas, that clip, no one wants to be the bad guy. No one wants to see themselves as the bad guy. And most people, whenever they hear about injustice or something wrong, they want to listen, and which is true. We all do. We all want to go, okay, wait a second. So what happened? We want to give it the benefit of the doubt as much as we can, because that's, how most people are. And so I think part of it is, as they are absorbing a lot of this ideology, I think that they don't realize whenever they see they're so immersed in it, they only hear the buzzwords. They only hear the ginger here. They only hear the dog's name, the important part, and they don't understand, or they don't. It doesn't register the highly inflammatory nature of a lot of this rhetoric and how vitriolic and divisive it is. So they hear blah 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 oppression, blah 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 systemic, blah 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 privilege. They don't hear all of the super inflammatory rhetoric that goes around it. I mean, I had a personal experience with this, but I see it all the time online, in other spaces. But there was a friend, this was a couple months ago, a friend posted this thing about systemic racism, and it had all these instances of shootings of Black people, and it included Michael Brown on that list. And I made the mistake of commenting on social media thing, which is one reason why I really liked Project Thumper. I did a video talking about that. You can find it on my channel. But anyway, social media is just a nightmare. But my main point was, Michael Brown was a justified shooting. You shouldn't put him on a list with like Botham Jean or Ahmaud Arbery, or going all the way back to Amadou Diallo from the late 90s. You don't put Michael Brown on that list. In fact, what's funny is what I'm about to say happened after I posted this, but there was a district attorney that was elected to go relitigate the Michael Brown case, and said they were going to press charges against and convict Darren Wilson. And that district attorney who was elected to do that came out, I think it was maybe a week or so ago, and said they weren't going to file new charges in the Michael Brown case. Why? Because it was justified shooting. And so my point that I made to my friend, and this is a person who is a good person, I trust them, they are well-intentioned. That there is very few people that I would trust their intentions more than I trust the intentions of this person. So this is not an indictment of them. But I said, look, if you want to make an argument here, you probably shouldn't put Michael Brown here, because it distracts from cases that we would all agree on, like Amadou Diallo, which my guess is most people reading that list didn't even know who that was. I only know it because he's in Malcolm Gladwell includes his story at the end of the book Blink. But it's this guy who was an immigrant, I believe, from maybe Sudan or Somalia, and he got shot by 4 plainclothes cops getting out his wallet. I mean, they shot him like a couple dozen times. It was a horrible, horrible incident. So my point is, you don't put Michael Brown, who was totally justified, in the shooting was totally justified, in with someone like Amadou Diallo, or more recently Botham Jean, or Ahmaud Arbery, things like that. And the responses I got were people saying that I was an evil racist, I was a murderer, that people like me are the reason why all those men were dead, and my ideas are so evil, and God's mad at me. There was one response that was like, if you're going to write a textbook about virtue signaling, that it would be like, this is the template you want to use for maximum virtue signaling. Because it was this thing about, oh, I hope your words are true because they're evil and they are so spiteful, and God is mad at you, but I forgive you, and all these. It was very, very noble kind of response. But I'm seeing my friend who, again, this is a person who I have no doubts about their intentions and their integrity as a person, but they're sitting there like liking all these horribly vitriolic comments. And I messaged them, and it took like 3 times of me articulating and that's honestly where I got where I started to kind of what you'd say maybe the genesis of me, kind of looking at this from that lens of that emotional abuse, and especially the people who are functioning as this but don't realize it, because it took me, I think it was 3 times of emphasizing to this person, like, go back and do you see what these people were saying to me? Like, these character attacks aren't true. This is malicious, hurtful stuff. Like, and you're just going along with it. And I told my friend at the time, I said, to your credit, my guess is that you didn't even understand, like it didn't register to you. You saw, what's here. I didn't give him the example of the Far Side comic, but my friend just, knew that they were, educating another privileged white male, not, that they were saying these horrible, unfounded character attacks against me. And it took 3 times before this person went back and was like, oh yeah, I could see why that'd be offensive. I'm sorry. I didn't realize. And so that's what I'm saying is that, someone like my friend who is, again, a person whose character I do not question at all, can be so blinded to how vitriolic and how completely inflammatory and, derogatory in a lot of ways the rhetoric is here, because it's wrapped in this package of justice and fighting oppression, and we're going to get equity, and we're going to take out this evil, oppressive, capitalist, white, patriarchal, heteronormative, the words type of system. And so, but again, back to my original point is that people, I think, are getting caught up in this and not realizing it. And so I think it's a good, we'll kind of wrap it up here. I have one more clip that I want to look at, but we'll wrap it up here. I think it's a good thing and a bad thing that so many people are, I guess, promulgating this and are, moving forward this atmosphere of abuse. The good thing is that I think a lot of them are well-intentioned. And so like, they're not necessarily true believers in, trying to tear down the system of capitalism and create this utopian, authoritarian, neo-Marxist state. Like, they just want to do the right thing. Again, like any normal person would, if they are told that there's injustice, they don't want there to be injustice, period. And so I think it's a good thing because we can kind of, we can use the language, kind of against them because we know they're well-intentioned. And, just like no one likes to be told that they're a racist, bigot, misogynist, whatever thing, no one wants to be told, hey, in your relationships with your friends and family and coworkers, you're kind of operating in the same way that an emotionally abusive person would, even if you're not meaning to, because, like I said in my last video, this is something we can all agree to, at least the kind of the definitions and the criteria here. So if you walk up to someone and say, man, I have this friend, I'm trying to give them advice. I would love your thoughts on this. They're in a relationship and they feel like they constantly have to walk on eggshells. They don't feel comfortable expressing any differing opinion or even doubt with what, this other person has. And they're constantly self-censoring. And they're, anytime they object, they're just told they're being too defensive. What do you think they should do? Anyone would say that's an unhealthy relationship. Anyone go, that sounds kind of abusive, dude. And so my point is that you can use that as to build a bridge with someone and say, okay, actually, this is a story about me and you, because that's how I feel when I'm around you. You're telling me that any objection or any doubt I have is just an expression of my fragility or something, or trying to maintain power. And so it just silences me. This is a toxic kind of thing. And so I think because most people are well-intentioned, that it could be a way to help kind of bring them out of this. And one, hopefully strip away the, quote, moral authority of this ideology, because it's anything but it maintains legitimacy in people's minds by being perceived as such. And so if people are told, hey, you're acting abusive and you're getting it from this group that is, or that, that whatever this new ideology is, it's encouraging you to act abusive, hopefully it strips some of that away. But it's also difficult. So it's a good thing, because if someone really is well-intentioned, hopefully helping them understand the way they're operating will create some bridges and some opportunity to have some real dialogue. It's not the we need to have a conversation in the way it's used now, which is never actually a conversation, but to where you could actually maybe have real conversations in the truest sense. But the difficult part about it is, again, just like no one wants to be told that they're a racist, bigot, misogynist, no one wants to be told they're acting in an emotionally abusive way, because, like, back to Michael Douglas in, Falling Down, I'm the bad guy. Like, no one wants to think that they're the bad guy. And so it's difficult. That's why, like I said, this is a really difficult video to make, because I don't really know how to go about it. But like, they need to know that and just understand that, like, this is an ideology that's only going to continue to spread, and it hermetically seals itself. So again, part of an abusive relationship is this concept of gaslighting. And I might do a whole video on this in and of itself. But part of that is where you distort reality. The abuser distorts reality for the victim, and they will respond to any criticism in a way that kind of flips the script and flips it around back on the victim. So if the victim objects or says, hey, whenever you did this, it was, I had some issues with that, then the abuser will say, well, you're just being defensive, or you're just this thing. And they'll turn it around and make themselves the victim and portray the victim as, an abuser, as the one in the wrong. And that, kind of throws them on their toes. And that's kind of the equivalent of you're just being fragile, or you're a racist. Now people are responding to the allegation or the character attack, because they don't want to be perceived as that. And it completely lets the initial issue slide, because now they're they're on the defensive. And that's a tactic that abusers use. That's a tactic of this ideology. That's where you get this concept of fragility, or you're just trying to maintain, or you don't know it because of your position of privilege or whatever. But that I'm not just saying that this is just kind of how it seems. Like there's actual academic scholarship driving this. And so that's why we need to have something like this notion of emotional abuse that's equally credible to fight back against, because this isn't going to stop, and it's only going to continue to strengthen, especially because these ideas are already set in stone. They're starting to disseminate into the main culture. And the topic of kind of gaslighting and flipping it around and, just silencing people by saying they're being fragile or whatever. This is a clip so James Lindsay is a professor. I'd highly recommend his content on New Discourses. He's like making a dictionary of a woke dictionary. It's a translation from critical theory, critical theory is the academic backbone to a lot of these ideas about, white privilege, systemic oppression, the cis heteronormative patriarchal colonial society that is, only trying to further its own power, and it's all it's slavery. Everything right now is the exact same as slavery. That critical theory is kind of the academic meat that's driving it. But here he unpacks the actual academic mindset and what's being taught and what's being used to justify the way that people are shutting down these conversations, and what a lot of us are experiencing as this gets disseminated down through these people who are functioning as abusers but don't necessarily realize what they're doing. And so I think this is a kind of a worthy place to end the video, because it's incredibly telling.
Okay, Allison Bailey said explicitly that these things are part of the package, writing in 2017 in a paper that she wrote in 2017 that makes the case that white people can only disagree with critical race theory, especially in educational contexts, to preserve their own privilege and never for legitimate reasons. Bailey confirms what I was arguing. She writes, critical pedagogy, and there's a lot here, by the way. There's a lot in this quote that people should chew on for a few minutes. This is one paragraph out of this paper, and there's a lot here. She writes, critical pedagogy begins from a different set of assumptions, meaning different than critical thinking, to be clear about the context, that are rooted in the neo-Marxian literature on critical theory, commonly associated with the Frankfurt School. Here, the critical learner is someone who is empowered and motivated to seek justice and emancipation. Critical pedagogy regards the claims that students make in response to social justice issues not as propositions to be assessed for their truth value, but as expressions of power that function to reinscribe and perpetuate social inequalities.
I was so tempted to let him give the rest of the quote, because there's, like he says, there is a lot there to unpack and chew on. I'm going to put the link in. All of the content and the resources over at New Discourses is worth your time, every drop of it. But that's the part that's important. So he's quoting Allison Bailey, who wrote, I think he said in 2017, and Allison Bailey was building on the work of another critical theorist named Audre Lorde, I believe, who is writing this whole thing about how the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. But the point is that part of this ideology is that opposition, and again, Bailey doesn't even make it about a race thing. She says any questions that have to do with social justice generally, so any agenda that can be, somewhat linked to social justice, is not to be viewed as a truth claim to be considered, but only as the person's, whoever is saying it, it's just their attempt to maintain power. So truth isn't important. What's important is to know that anyone who disagrees with us, you're not even supposed to consider what they say. This is just, they're trying to maintain their own power. And so that idea, kind of watered down and in various forms, is what a lot of us are receiving from well-intentioned people who are, who will say, if you have a doubt or something, well, they say, oh, well, that's just your privilege, or that's just fragility or whatever. Because this idea is already being disseminated out, that opposition, and that's part of that, kind of abuse atmosphere there, is that opposition is not actually a credible claim. It's not something to be considered as truthful, that it's only something that whenever someone has any doubts, it's only something to be considered as malicious and an attempt to maintain power by the person saying it. And so that's why I think it's important for us to have some kind of tool to, counteract this stuff and to, combat it with something I think way more substantiated and credible, which is this notion of whenever you do this, whenever you present things that can't be falsified and are self-confirming. So, I think you're a racist or a bigot. And if you agree, well, you're a bigot. And if you disagree, well, that just proves what I said, because you would only disagree because you didn't want to confront your own bigotry. And so there's no world in where I'm not right. Now, that's a completely perverse and corrupt worldview. And I think a lot of people who are promulgating that and putting that forward don't realize what they're doing. And a lot of times it's well-intentioned. I saw an example, and this is everywhere. And that's the other reason why it's important, is that this idea that that Lindsay's talking about here is infiltrated everywhere. I saw a tweet that was, I think it was something from Etsy. It was an exchange maybe on Etsy, where there's a woman who was selling like dream catchers or something. And another person commented like, this is cultural appropriation, da, 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 da. Of course, it's another white leftist who does that. It's almost always a white leftist. It's never, the people who they supposedly are advocating for. They just infantilize them and claim to speak for them. But and the woman who is making the dream catcher is like, oh my gosh, I had no idea. I'm so sorry. I wasn't trying to, be offensive. And of course, the person calling them out, this very virtuous person, is like, they educate them, right? That's about how, you got to educate people. This is a lifelong process of being educated. And so now there's one more person who is, self-censoring and has kind of somewhat been bullied or tricked into this, being told that they're racist because they're making dream catchers and selling them on Etsy. Well, that's cultural appropriation, and no one wants to be called a racist, no one wants to be called a bigot. And so it's very easy to buy into it. And so it spreads. And so that's my point. If I was going to leave you with anything here, is that I think we have to be really careful with this, because people don't realize what they're doing. Like I said, this interaction that I had with my friend a while back, I wasn't really mad at my friend because I know where they're coming from. It's the ideology that they've bought into. And so we have to be really careful to not respond in a way that is going to alienate these relationships and remove the possibility of us kind of at least having that initial conversation of, hey, this is unhealthy. This is not how healthy relationships function. Now, if you do confront them with this and they say, because like part of this, in the movie in Mean Girls, once Lindsay Lohan, once her character is told like, no, you are a mean girl, you are a plastic now, she digests that information and she changes. She says, I don't want to be like this anymore. And so I think that if you're able to, it's really difficult, because the people that are well-intentioned, they're still advocating and putting forth some really, really, really just toxic, vitriolic crap, and it's really corrosive for relationships. And so we have to be careful that we don't want to alienate them, which will just further confirm the ideology. And so my encouragement would be to give grace and have patience, at least to the point where you can tell them, hey, you want to have a conversation, let's have a conversation. And again, you can use the example that I gave of, say, I have this friend, here's what this is like. What do you propose? And then tell them, no, this is how I feel when I'm around you. I feel like I'm constantly walking on eggshells. Like, this doesn't seem healthy. If they really are well-intentioned, hopefully they'll receive that well. Now, if they double down or triple down or whatever, well, then I think you can probably shake the dust off your tunic and keep going, because anyone who is confronted with, this is how we're friends, me, this is what you're doing to our relationship. And if they are that committed to the cause that they don't care, well, then that's another story. But my encouragement would be to just at least keep in mind that a lot of the people who are promulgating this don't realize they're doing it. And I think that our greatest chance at successfully combating this is going to come from winning those people over and helping them realize that they're helping legitimize and strengthen an ideology that is not moral, that is not fighting oppression. It's oppression, it's authoritarianism, it's racism, it's bigotry, it's all these things just under a different name. That's all it is. And so I think that our best chance is at helping wake people up to that and using the perceived morality of this against itself by, helping them realize, no, this is not moral. Here's what morality is. It's having healthy relationships. This is how healthy relationships work. If you're doing something outside of this and they're encouraging you to do something outside of this, well, then you might want to reevaluate it. So that'd be my encouragement to you guys. All right, so I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to put all the resources I used here, including a link to Mean Girls. I had to get a free trial of Showtime on my Hulu account because I went back and watched it. These are all just YouTube clips. So I can give you a link to the to the page where you can rent Mean Girls if you want to watch it. But really, I'll include a lot of the sources of the stuff that I used in my other video and some of the stuff on organizational cultures and so on and so forth. And if you have any questions, if you think that I'm missing it or I'm off in any way, please let me know. I do think this is a really important topic, which is one of the reasons why it took me so long to make a video. I don't know if I did a good job in articulating the point, but I wanted to do it justice. But my point is that if you feel like I missed that in any way, or if you have any issues, or you feel like I'm being unfair, or anything like that, please let me know. I'm open to that. You can put it in the comments. You can message me directly. That's fine. And that said, if this is the type of thing you're interested in, please go to my locals channel. We're trying to build a community over there. That's at returntoreason.locals.com. You can post your own content. You can post articles. We're trying to have conversations. It's not just me trying to throw my ideas out into the ether. It's really trying to build a community. So please go and join over there. Follow me on Twitter. That's at My Mundane Mind. You can also find me on YouTube. That's at Return to Reason, my YouTube channel. I upload my podcasts to Spotify in audio form as well. And I've written content on Medium and on ThinkSpot, and that's also at Return to Reason. And, I am aware, this is the last thing I'll say, I'm aware that, today, of course, this always happens whenever I'm going to make a video, some huge news hits. I almost started this video with, this is not a video about Kamala Harris, despite the fact that's probably what people want to hear right now. Because as I was working on this video, of course, the news drops that Joe Biden chose Kamala Harris as his running mate. I do have thoughts on this, but I'll put those in a separate video I'm going to make. We're getting into that. I've mentioned this before. I hate this when the news cycle, I feel like I constantly have to respond to it, and I don't feel like we really get to dig into the deep ideas whenever we're just engaged in this kind of surface level 24-hour news cycle. But I will do something, talking about, oh yeah, there is a presidential election, here in less than 3 months. So we should probably talk a little bit about that and the implications, and I'll give my general opinions on the Kamala pick in a video dedicated completely to that. So I haven't forgotten about that, but I just think this stuff is more important. Joe Biden could pick a baked potato. He could pick Condoleezza Rice. He could pick, anyone, Michelle Obama. He could pick, he could pick Ted Cruz. He could have some crazy, and by the way, Joe Biden didn't pick anyone. The campaign people, whoever the higher ups, they told him who the pick was going to be. And then he still had to write it down to remember who it was. And then afterwards, he asked if there was any creamy peanut butter left because he really likes the creamy kind, the crunchy kind. It pulls his dentures out because that's where his mind's at right now. But anyway, my point is that the cultural stuff, this idea of the atmospheres of abuse and the things that are going on culturally, I think is way more important than who the VP pick is. Not that that's not important, but regardless of who he picks and what happens in this election, if we don't solve the issues that are dividing us as a society, then all of the rest is irrelevant. All of that's downstream from where we are. Our politics is broken because our society is broken in terms of how we relate to each other. So I think this is more important. But I will do something on the Kamala pick because it really is something that I am kind of confused by. But I think I understand some parts of it. Other parts of it I don't understand. But we'll talk about it. I'll do another video. So anyway, that's it. I'm going to have part 2 of my conversation with Kevin at Engineering Politics is going to post tomorrow on my locals page and hopefully on YouTube, depending on how fast it uploads. It'll be on my locals page first, and then part 3 is going to be posted the day after that. And Kevin and I are going to record the next kind of component of that conversation about corrupted hierarchies tomorrow, but I don't know when we'll end up posting that, probably next week sometime. So a lot of stuff is going to be going on, a lot of content coming out. So I hope you check it out. I appreciate you watching, and I guess I will check you later. Peace.